Thank you all for coming. I'm Johanna Feick. I'm a product manager and product designer. I have previously built my own companies, but I've also been working for a company builder, for an AI company, and so on. So I've been able to get a lot of experience from different sides. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the design principles and the basics of UI UX. Okay. So first off, I want to dive a little bit into the difference between bad and good and great design. So good design doesn't need an explanation. It's self-explanatory, it's obvious, comes naturally. Great design, however, it's like an entire experience. It's memorable, everything feels entirely natural, and in a sense, it stands out against other designs that you've seen before. To make this a little bit more concrete, if you want to build a good design, it's most of the time enough if you adhere to basic design principles. The design should be, as I said before, easy to understand, usable, which means that the user can get from A to B without any roadblocks. It's intuitive and there's no problem in using the app on its base level. Another point is the app is useful. So whenever you're designing something, you're looking to solve a problem that the user has, at least when you're designing software. And if you solve this problem, then of course the app becomes useful. Another point is the app should be delightful to use. This is something, if you have a good user experience, if you have a great UI and everything is, fun, nice colors and so on, it will be delightful to use this app. And if you got that down, you already have a good design, which is something that's really great because a lot of applications that you encounter, they have bad design, and bad design is very expensive. It takes the user a long time to get to their goal, if at all, and that costs businesses a lot of money. Now, the great design, again, it puts another layer on top of this. It tells a story. It's an entire experience. Everything comes natural. Everything is on brand. Maybe you have your own icons, you have your own components, and you're not just reusing what is there with material design, for example. And that gives this overall experience. And of course, this still respects all the design principles that you know, but sometimes it looks past best practices. Sometimes in order to be innovative, to do something new, you have to look past the best practices. You have to experiment, and maybe you'll find new things that go past what is considered a best practice. Of course, that is way too advanced for anything that I'm going to cover today, but I still wanted to give this little overview and differentiator. So in order to build this good design, there is a variety of things that you have to consider. There are different design principles, but there are also different elements that your design has. Maybe you'll build a design system, for example, to make sure that everything is consistent and adhere to these principles. The 7 principles that are listed here are the basics of design. And you always have to consider these whenever you're designing something. The first one is emphasis, a focus point. When you design something, whether it's an application or even a slide deck like this, you always have to think, what is the center of attention? What should be the center of attention? And that is what you want to emphasize in order to lead the user's eyes to this element. And there are many ways to do that. And a lot of these 7 principles are intertwined with each other. So if you look at principle number 6, movement, leading the user, that's exactly what I talked about right now. And one way to do that is using color, using sizing or proportions, using contrast in order to lead the user to this space, to this thing that you want them to see that is the most important part of your design. To make this concrete, for example, if you have a sign-up process, usually you will have this like large button down below that says register or it says login. And usually this will have a bright color that stands out against the rest of the design. So in this case, there was used proportion and there was used color and the specific space in order to draw the attention to this login. And the user will always look at the middle in the start. And if you have the button down below, you're leading the user's eyes from the top to the bottom to this button, and they will automatically scan what is above that button. And that is like one of these elements, movement. Another thing that's very important, and that is often overlooked, and that is often one of the things that makes a design bad, is when there's a lack of consistency. Consistency, whenever an app has it, you don't really notice it. You only notice it when it's not present. Consistency is you decide that you have one primary color in your design system and you use this color throughout your entire design. That's consistent. Now, not every app is going to do that. And then they have an inconsistent design. A really great way and very easy way, if you have done it a couple of times, to achieve consistency is to have a design system, which I'm going to cover in the next part. The last thing here, or the last two things, are balance and white space. White space or negative space is all the empty space that you see, in a sense. In this case, you can consider anything that doesn't have any element in it, white space or empty space, even though it's like black in my presentation right now. There's nothing happening there. And when you're starting out, that's a hard thing to deal with. If you design a mobile app, that's not going to be as much of a problem because the hard thing about designing for mobile is that you have very little space to work with. But if you design for a website or you design a poster or something like that, you often have a lot of white space. And a mistake that beginners often make is that they're uncomfortable with this white space and they try to fill it up. And then usually it will no longer seem balanced and there will be too much going on and you will lose the focus point and the emphasis on the most important element that I've previously mentioned. So it's important to get comfortable with the white space, and a good way to do that is just looking at really great designs on, for example, Dribbble or any other platforms, and you'll see how professionals are really dealing with this white space, and it's going to give you better sense for design in and of itself. Because design doesn't only consist of intuition, it consists of design principles, and some of those, it just makes sense to follow them because it's basically, in a sense, proven that those define a good design. So, as I said, consistency is very important. It's one of the things that you can do with a little bit of upfront planning and effort that can make your whole app a lot better. When you do a design system, I recommend, for example, using Figma. In Figma, you can set different color styles. You can set font styles. You can even set like shadow styles in a sense, or elevation styles. You can create components, and all of that, you can start building your design system, which enables you to have a consistent design and consistent elements throughout your entire product. When you build your design system, there are different elements that you have to consider. One is your color system. Usually people have a primary color, sometimes a secondary. I have very, very rarely seen a third main color. Usually you just stick to two. And some neutrals that you can use for text color, for background color, and some action colors or status colors. For example, if you have an app where there's an order process, you might have something like order canceled and you want that in red, or you have order in progress and you might want a yellow accent color, in a sense. In order to decide for your own colors, it can be really helpful to just go with material design color scales. Generally, I really recommend reading the material design guide, especially when you're just starting out, because it's really helpful. And you'll also be able to use some components and so on from material design directly in Figma because they have libraries that are available to you. And it's just going to make it easier for you to get started. The same for typography in a sense. You can just pick one, you set different typography styles, and there are typography scales that you can look at. Again, material design, they have different typography scales where they pretty much take the effort from you away to think about, oh, what size should header 1 have and header size 2 and the subheader and so on. They just give you a pretty good outline and it's a very good starting point for you. With all of this, I would see it a little bit fluent. So the color system, the typography system, your entire design system allows you to quickly iterate. It allows you to be very fluid in your design. You do not have to spend hours and hours of finding your perfect primary color or brand color or whatever. If you have a design system, you can just set the basics, just make sure that the way you distribute them makes sense. And if you at any point down the road during interviews with customers or whatever, find out that this might not be the best fit, you can change it with one click. With one click, and it will be changed in your entire product. And that's why it makes so much sense to really think with this design system from zero when you're building a product from zero. It's a little bit different if you're joining a company that already has all of that, then you just have to work a little bit with what they've got. But if you build your product from zero and you intend it to be very iterative, it does make a lot of sense to go with a design system. Now, there are some other elements of the design system. I don't really want to go too much in depth with them. One is, for example, spacing. This is like the padding or the distance between elements. Usually those go in grids of like 4 pixel or 8 pixel size. That's a very good baseline to remember. And you can also read up more about that on a material design guide as well. Elevation. You can think about elevation in the way that your design has different layers. Those layers are on top of each other. So one layer is elevated above the other. And sometimes you want to make that visual in the sense that it throws a shade. And that is what elevation is. You can have different levels of elevation. You can set your effect or like shadow style also on Figma. Again, here, I would say it's a little bit of a, whether you want to do that, it's not a must-have. And a lot of times when people do like flat design, we don't even do any shadows or anything at all. If you use elevation, it's not like you have to use it for every element, but if you decide to use it for a specific element, remember to use it consistently. So again, if you decide to use elevation or like a shadow for your menu or for your pop-ups, just give the shadow to every pop-up, just give the shadow to every menu, just keep it consistent. Then with icons and components, you can pretty much decide to use already existent icons. Oftentimes it makes sense to just go with material design or other libraries because it can also be easier for the developer to just implement those. If you do custom icons, they might have to integrate each of them again. It's just important when you do the icons that you decide on a specific style. So either full or outlines, and that you stay consistent with the style again throughout your design. Components are little elements that you build. If we go with the example that I previously did with this little button in its entirety can be a component. It makes sure that you always use the same button style. For example, if you have a rounded button, sometimes you round it by a different degree, and thus it might become inconsistent throughout the design. But if you have it as a component, you will always make sure to have the same degree of rounding on it. Last but not least is motion. whenever you use an app and you close a window, there's usually some sense of little animation in order to do it. And this animation is also very important because there are differences between animations that close something or animations that make something pop up. And here to read about that more in depth, I also again recommend the material design. Pretty much there is a general theme that when something is closed, that the animation will be a little bit faster. And when something is being opened up, the animation will be a little bit slower to give the user time to grow adapted to this new element that we're showing them. That would be, in a sense, like to sum it up, but of course, it's a little bit more complex. And it's definitely not the first thing that you have to think about with your design. Um, it's just one of the things that are going to give it a little bit of a final touch at the end. I'm not going to go too much in depth into the design tools. There's also, of course, much, much more than I have listed here. I would say the baseline is that Figma and Adobe XD are some of the most popular ones that allow you to do pretty much anything that you need, from user flows to wireframe to prototyping. And it's generally a good idea to go with them. I personally prefer Figma a lot over the others, but just feel free to take a screenshot and take a look at them later. So now we've talked a little bit about design principles. We talked a little bit about how to build the design system. But of course, the most important part is the actual design process. Whenever you're doing product design, and I have to say that there are significant overlaps with product management as well, you have to understand the user, market, competitors, and trends. You use this information to define problems that you see. Then you search for solutions, prioritize those, identify USP, and use all of this to design your solution. Of course, as always, get feedback and iterate. To go a little bit more in depth, first, you need to grasp the exact landscape. And in the UX process, a lot of that consists of user research. But since I'm also a product manager, I wanted to make sure to take a little more holistic approach and kind of merge the process here a little bit. You also want to look at the market. Research the market, look at market trends, look at competitors. Just to make sure about one thing here, there is a difference in how you can approach this. If you, for example, take a first principle approach, then maybe you don't really need to analyze competitors' products because you might not even want to, because you want to think that solution up from the very bottom. You want to look at the problem and you want to think about how would I solve this if nothing else already existed. If that's like one way to do it. Another way to do it is the one that I displayed here, and it's really getting accustomed to the market. It's gaining knowledge into the competitive landscape and learning a little bit what are other people doing, what are they doing right, what are they doing wrong, what are their USPs. And this allows you to identify where is a market opportunity for me and what solution can I build that serves a need that the user is not being catered to by anyone else. And of course, you need to do the user research. You need to talk to users. You need to do interviews, surveys, and use that to create a persona. When you create a persona, what you do it for is to understand who you're building your product for. On the left here, I have put up one of my templates for persona, and it allows you to understand not only the demography, but also list defining traits, goals, needs, challenges, problems, motivations, character, and their biography. Basically, what you want to achieve is you want to make this person as human as possible. And this is what will allow you or will help you in empathizing even more with your user base or your potential target group. and identify where you can help, how you can help, and what they really want. Now, after you've done all of this, you should have a pretty good understanding about what potential problems are out there. And this will also, of course, allow you to look at the solutions. For this, I have actually thought a little bit about what to take as an example. And I thought basically if we consider that Airbnb didn't exist. Before Airbnb existed, when someone traveled, they only had hotels as an option. Hotels, of course, are very expensive. Vacation rentals weren't always available, or back then, not even listed online. And options like Craigslist weren't exactly the most trustworthy. So a solution of that would be to allow people to offer their spare room online, include peer reviews and maybe verifications for safety. And building this solution out would be Airbnb. But this is basically the process that you're going through as both a product designer and a product manager, identifying the problem, identifying potential solutions, and of course, prioritizing these solutions. You really want to fine-tune this because you don't want to build an all-in-one solution from zero. It's really easy to get carried away and wanting to solve all of the problems that you found in one product. Instead, you want to identify the most pressing problem, the best solution for this, and use this to build your MVP. For this, of course, it's best if this thing that you identify is a USP against competitors, because you need to differentiate yourself in some way. And you really want to fine-tune this thesis that you have, this problem solution thesis that you have. And a good way to do that is looking at a bunch of different templates, which really help you guiding your thought process across all the different things that you would like to consider. So in product management, for example, there's like a value proposition canvas, which helps you really think about what are potential gains that you can offer to the user through your solution. What are potential, like painkillers in a sense that your solution provides them. And it really guides you through this thought process. And there's many different options available to do this. You don't have to do all of them. You should just find some that work best for you and apply those if needed. But it's not a must-have in a sense. You can always just do an open brainstorming and dial down the solutions by prioritizing them in how much impact they have and how easy they are to build. It doesn't always have to be this or that template in order to achieve that. So now we have like the information about the user, we have our problem solution thesis, and now it's really about designing the app, because at this point in time, with what we have available, there's not really much more we can find out. We already talked to the users, we think we know what they want, and we will use this information to build our app. And there are different milestones that are part of this process. And not always will you be required to do all of them. If you work as a UI UX designer, for example, and you work for a startup, sometimes you're gonna have to skip some of these parts because there's not enough time. But in a best case scenario, you get the time to do all of these. And the first one would be information architecture. This really helps you to not forget anything that's important for your app, because you're basically thinking about what type of information do I need in what part of the app? Or as displayed here, for example, for a website, you will be thinking about, I need an About Us page, and this About Us page should talk about the team and our product management teams, our marketing team, and so on. And it just helps you organize what information is relevant in what part of the app. Another thing that's very important are user flows. they allow you to draft the path that a user is going to take through your app. So for example, in a sign up process or in your, like after your splash screen, either they will be already registered or they have to register. So here you either have your registered user, you have your users that still have to register. That's like one branch. And the user flow helps you draft this path that the user takes. And it helps you again to organize your thoughts and to identify what types of screens you need. Because it's very hard to just skip both of these and just jump right into designing, especially if you have never done it and you don't really have any other examples present, because there's a decent chance that you're going to miss some parts and then you're just going to find out later down the road and it's just going to be more chaotic. Like these two things will really allow you to be more structured in your approach. Then after that, of course, finally, we can get started with designing. It's been a long time, but now we're finally at the actual design process. So the first step there are wireframes. Wireframes, there can be low fidelity wireframes, high fidelity wireframes, which means in a sense, if you look to this like thing on the left, that's just like a very, very rough draft, that's a low fidelity wireframe. That's I like to do these. I just like to quickly draft up something within a minute or two, just to get like my first thoughts on a piece of paper. But you can then start to build those out to be higher fidelity, to have more detail. And that's where you get these types of graphics, where you have you know, you already might have some icons, you might have a little bit of text, you have buttons, but usually you don't really have like a proper logo yet or proper color yet. You know, it's just overall, it's not a finished design. It's more like framing what it would look like, framing where should be the button, or maybe even how large it should be. And it really depends a little bit on you or what the company that you work for wants. Personally, oftentimes we don't really do these type of like really high fidelity wireframes. I just jump to doing straight up the mockups. The mockups, that's maybe how you can see the difference between the wireframe and the mockup. The mockup already looks like what you're going to see in the finished app. It looks and feels exactly like the final app would look like. This is what developer will develop in the end. And the prototype is what allows you to even show the type of motions that I previously mentioned. If you remember, when we were talking about design systems, I talked about motion and animations. And the prototype shows how all of these images, all of these mockups that we created are connected, but it also shows how they act. And if I have a little bit time in the end, I do have a prototype here that I can show you. But I just continue for now and then we can revisit that later because I'm already seeing we're a little bit tight on time now. So after you've done your prototype, you can use that prototype to gain feedback. Most important part of this entire thing, that because then you actually will know whether what you thought to be the great solution is actually the great solution. And ways to do that are user interviews, which is like just sitting down with someone one-on-one, asking them a bunch of questions. Just make sure you don't ask them leading questions. A leading question would be something like, do you think this part was good? Do you think this part was bad? If you use these type of words that are already evaluating in a sense, you're kind of leading the person that you're talking to in the direction to make a positive comment or make a negative comment. So you have to make sure that the question that you ask is as neutral as possible, because this is what is going to enable you to get the most honest and accurate feedback. Another way to go is user surveys. You can just do an online survey, again, ask people some questions. It will be easier for you to get a larger quantity, but you will not have the chance to talk to people. And some things will come up more naturally during a conversation. So both of these things are very important. And if possible, you should do both of them. Another one is usability testing. If you remember in the beginning when we talked about good design, one of the parts was usable, meaning, is it intuitive? Is it easy for a person to navigate it? Usability testing allows you to assess exactly that. Usability testing is you're taking your prototype, you're handing it to someone, and you're giving them a list of tasks. So, for example, task could be sign up for our application or upload a photo in our social media app, something like that. And then you just watch what they're doing. And sometimes you will see that they will click around a bunch of different things that are completely unrelated. And that's when you have to start questioning whether your user experience is truly intuitive. If it takes people like 3, 4, 5 times to find the right spot, you can assume some people are going to get frustrated, and you can assume that there might be something wrong with the user experience. Of course, it's important to talk to multiple people because people will have very different experiences with your app, and you want to make sure that you have enough data to really see a common theme and sort them by these themes. Another one which I wanted to add just to be more, holistic is metrics. Now, if you're just testing your design, if you're just testing your Figma prototype, you're not going to have that. If we think one step further and the developer has already developed this, then you might want to think about some KPIs, some numbers like daily active users, or how often do people like and comment, and what is the ratio between someone seeing a post and someone liking them. You just want to think about some KPIs and track them, because this will, of course, allow you to pretty much passively see how people interact with your app once it has already been developed. Now, when you have all of that, you can sort the feedback into different themes to see where they have something in common, and to see, oh, maybe I have 6 people that are saying they don't really understand how to upload a photo. Then that's definitely a serious issue, for example, and that just allows you to sort your thoughts and to prioritize which are the things that you actually need to iterate on. And then after you've done that, you can iterate accordingly. So that would be the basics, the basic design principles, the basics of UI UX. Thank you all for listening, and I'm looking forward to your questions. So if you have any questions, you can just write them in the chat. I'm not, if you can unmute yourself, you can also just ask them. I'm not sure what the rules were.
Yeah, so it looks like someone has raised their hand.
Mm-hmm.
If that's you, you can just ask your question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, is there like any template we could like follow for all these user flows and the mockups, like something that's already done already that we could just take and just edit it?
So if you look at user flows, for example, I oftentimes use Miro, because Miro does have a lot of templates and so on already available. And it makes it really easy to draft it up, but user flows, usually you draft them from zero. Like, I don't really have any templates I could provide you with except showing the base structure. Now, when it comes to wireframes or mockups, if you look at Figma, there are different component libraries available. I mentioned material design a couple of times, as you might have noticed. And material design also has plugins for Figma they do have design libraries for Figma, which means if you go to the material design website and you read a little bit up on the things that I mentioned, there are going to be some links to the Figma design libraries, and you will just be able to use their components and their icons, for example. And that will give you a very good starting point to build your own designs. I think other than that, I can always recommend to look at other apps, competitors, and Dribble and so on for inspiration.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, Ralph. Ralph says, one problem I face is to make a web page more flexible for smaller and larger screens. Sometimes dealing with Flexbox and grids becomes kind of difficult and time consuming. Do you have any advice to approach this issue? I feel you. It is time consuming. I usually just build components to be responsive. And if you use Figma, it will allow you to build a component, for example, that the box automatically adapts to the content that is within. And I think that's what you mean with flex boxes as well. But from my knowledge, that's like the only way to really do it and to really build it. But from my current standpoint, since I've built so many components and I do have the design systems and the component libraries that I prepared, it doesn't cost as much time anymore because I can just reuse them and adapt them. But I haven't really found a way to do it much easier than that yet, sorry. Okay, do we have any other questions?
All right, if we don't have any other questions, would you want to go through kind of that prototype flow you were talking about earlier?
Yeah. Just a really short one though. So as I said, you can build with Figma, but there are also a lot of other prototyping tools. Some of them, I personally find them a little bit more intuitive than Figma's prototyping. But in the past couple of months or like the past year, Figma has done a lot more in regards to prototyping. And I definitely have to take the time and to dive a little bit more deeper into that. But some other apps that I mentioned are, for example, InVision or the Marvel app. Back when I started with design, I actually used Marvel. And this is one of the quick prototypes that I did. So with the prototyping, as you can see, it's already like a full-blown phone in a sense. And you can just click your way around it to set everything up. And it gives you the feel of a real app. And this allows you to do this specific testing. So as you can see, for example, the motion design, it's coming in from the right. So you can already see how this would act as a real app. We're gonna set our time slot and it comes flying in from the bottom, just like I want it to be in the final application again. And I can set my time here, select my slot and confirm it. And that way it pretty much leads me through the entire process as if it was already a fully functioning app. It's just a very, very short prototype, as I said, but I think this helps to show a little bit what you can do in sense of motion design and motions in general within prototyping. There's also much, much more than you can do, much more complex things that I'm not really showing in this short prototype or click dummy. But I definitely still wanted to share it.
It's really cool. I like seeing like the complexity of like I guess like down to the details of like the motions of like which like way the screen fades in and out and like how that can kind of like assist developers with like the super like regular level decisions. Really
Yeah. And I think that is one of the parts that it's very easy to forget. It's very easy to forget this type of motion when you're designing an app. You're like, oh, I got all my nice mock-ups, I'm finished. But then that leads to a lot of questions again down in the development process when the developers will be getting back to you and they're like, yeah, but what do you want it to look like? And the prototyping allows you to really visualize that. And it can be any type of animations, I think, at this point. And it's not that hard to set up a prototype with Marvel, because the way this works is you basically just use your mouse to pull a little hitbox in a sense, and then you just say, Marvel, go to this and this screen if someone clicks on that and play this animation. So it's just like, it takes a little time to build it, but it's very intuitive and very easy to do. And I think this is also a very good thing to do because we're here like at Hack Nights, it's a very great way to ask users for feedback. It's also a good thing to show if you want to talk to prospective co-founders, if you want to found your app and you don't have a developer yet, but you still want them to see what it should look like later on. I think some people have even used these type of click dummies to raise money on an idea, although raising funds on an idea is super hard. But there are many ways to utilize this. And that's why it depends a little bit on what you want to do, but in many ways, it's recommendable to do this type of thing to gain feedback. There are a few cases in which you don't need to do it. Let's say sometimes you don't have the time because you just need to quickly fix something for an app and you know pretty much exactly what the customer wants because you're building a solution specifically for them. And then sometimes you don't really need to make it as complex as building a prototype. It might be enough to just explain to them how it's gonna work and look at some mockups. But if you can do it, it's definitely in most cases a good idea.
Yes, it definitely seems really worthwhile for like the benefits and like the like extra detail that other programs or mockups like might not provide.
Okay. Then any other questions? Because I think we still have a minute.
I guess I was also curious, kind of like outside of like playing around with the different wireframing and prototyping softwares you mentioned, did you have like, I guess, any other resources where you could go to like learn more about like product thinking or like UI UX design?
So personally, I think Google overall has very good resources. There's this Google UI UX course. I took that when I already had a lot of UI UX design experience, but I think it provides a very good overview and it's not that expensive. If you wrap it up in 5 days or a week, I think it's even free. That is definitely a good starting point. Then again, material design, Dribble is good for references. Then if you look at, for example, LinkedIn, it makes sense to follow different, like thought leaders or like industry professionals. There are a lot of people that post a lot of tips about your UX designing, which can be really helpful in shaping your own product intuition and also in learning new hacks in general, of course.
Yes.
Because there's always things that we don't see, And with product in general, product management, there's just a lot of levels to product management, to be honest. I feel like it's being done differently, very differently, depending on what company you work for. Process might look very different, different templates, and so on. I think product, like the skills that you need, is just really being able to empathize with the user, to really understand their problem, and then have the creativity to build solutions for that, innovative solutions, and be creative, but at the same time be organized enough to be able to prioritize it and put it into concrete roadmap. And I think that is a very interesting skill set to work on, creativity versus structure. And I think personally, I did a course I think was Product HQ or something on product management. And it's a very good entry point because it provides you with some of the base level templates as well. I think the course is like $200, maybe $300. But you will also work on a capstone project while doing it. So it's really very practical oriented, and you'll get feedback from other course participants. So I feel like that is very helpful, and it will also provide you with a good overview of different templates. I also personally have a lot of templates on Miro, so if any of you would like those templates, I'm happy to share them.
Awesome. It'll be great. It's like a lot of good information for all of us to kind of continue learning afterwards, and I can send out those after the fact. I took some brief notes.
Thank you.
So,
all right. Then it was very nice to have the chance to introduce you all to UI/UX a little bit today. I hope that you're leaving with a little bit of new knowledge, with a little bit of better understanding about design. I hope that you now have some good starting points to start your product design, product management, UI/UX journey. And also don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you have questions, I always try to take some time to get back to people and try to support you on your journey. And I hope that the Hack Nights have been great for all of you and that you have a lot of cool things ahead. And then I'm wishing you all a great Sunday.